Morning, everybody. My name is James Rosenberg, and today I'm going to be making a video that's pretty informative for anybody that is an expat living in South Korea or Japan. I lived in both countries for many years, and as a lot of my followers know, I'm a really detail-oriented guy. And when a bank tells me, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're a foreigner, you can't do that," I really don't trust that answer, and it sounds like a really good just brush me off, next please kind of response. And so I've dug into it very deeply and figured out the credit ratings and the application process, the requirements, et cetera, because there has to be a reason for it. And so yeah, so in this video here, if you want to get a credit card or debit card in any of those countries, you're gonna want to listen up because you're gonna need to know this stuff. If you think, for example, I'm going to go right into the first part. As an expat, if you're from the United States, Canada, the EU, whatever, Australia, and you're like, well, I had a great credit standing and I have an American Express in California, doesn't mean anything. You might as well be an 18-year-old with absolutely zero credit history. You're starting all over from ground zero here. You have no history at all. There is no conversion of that at all. So if you have a bad credit history and you're moving overseas, then that's probably beneficial to you because you got a clean slate. But if you've got a very good credit history and you move overseas, well, guess what? You get to run it all again. So, all right. So I'm going to focus more on Korea, but a lot of this does apply to Japan as well. So do not skip through it. It really will work for you as well. Okay, so the big thing you need to know about both countries is there's basically two main financial institutions. There's basically a main bank or class one top tier bank, which are your big ones. In Korea, that'd be like KB Kookmin Bank or Hana Bank. Who else do we have? Shinhan Bank, Woori Bank, those ones. In Japan, that would be things like SMBC, Mitsubishi, Sumitomo, and SMBC, just the big one, you see them everywhere. Savings banks, these would be the smaller ones. In a lot of like post offices are technically savings banks. They don't really deal with a lot of credit cards that much. They're very limited in what they can offer, and they don't have the same securities. However, they do have a little bit higher interest rates if you do have like a savings account or a certificate of deposit, if you're into that. But in Korea, that would be things like SBI or Russia Cash, that sort of thing. If you have bad credit ratings, you'll go to these banks. They'll give you either cash loans or they'll give you a credit card with a really high fee and almost no discounts or points or that kind of system. So, okay, so the big thing to know in Korea is that after in the Asian financial crisis, the credit rating system became extremely popular because a lot of companies lost a lot of money during that situation. And so they now have a credit rating system. Overall, the scale is much more simple than what you would see in the United States. A level 1 credit rating is like an 850 beacon. It's perfect, and almost nobody has it. Really, really, really hard to get that. A 2 is very good. 3, 4, all the way down to I'd say like a 6. I'd say 5 or 6. You're questionable, and then you might have to prove. If you're going to apply for something, even as a Korean, you're going to have to prove some documents, or you have money, or you have a savings, or whatever, and anything down into like a level 9, level 10, pretty much every major bank will not touch you. You'll have to go to those savings banks that I mentioned before. So the big thing that a lot of these guys are looking at when reviewing, there's two major credit review firms in Korea, and that is NICE, it's the information service, and also the Korea Credit Bureau. And they look at different factors and different percentages. For example, the NICE information service When considering your credit, they actually look at your overdue payments is 40%, a little over 40% of your score. That does include things like cell phone bills. Oh, bro, it's just like a week late, man. Guess what? You just destroyed your credit. Anything that is even a day overdue, if they want to, they can ding you for it. Most telecommunications companies in Korea, if you do not pay them, you'll usually get like a one-time per year leniency of about 5 days. They'll send you a message and they'll say, hey, you didn't pay, you forgot to update your credit card information, whatever it is. In Japan, it's a little bit different. The cell phone companies there, if you don't pay, they typically do not report that to the credit bureaus, but they will report it to other cell phone carriers. So if you don't pay and you try and switch from like Docomo to SoftBank and get a new phone over there and not pay the other guy, they probably won't give you a free phone or discounted phone. You have to pay all upfront in cash in order to get service. So it's a little bit better if you're ducking the system, but it's not by any means ideal. Okay, back to NICE. The second thing they look at 25.8% is your latest credit date. So if your most recent credit activity is you bought a stick of gum 3 years ago on a credit card, that says that you have no recent credit history. That's detrimental to getting applied to anything else. 23% comes in at your debt level, and then 10.9%, how long have you had a credit rating in Korea, or your longest amount. The second group would be the Korea Credit Bureau, and they look at things a little bit differently. The debt level comes in at 35%, your overdue payments at 25%, your latest credit data at 24%, and how long the consumer has been borrowing comes in at about 16%. So those are all things you're going to want to keep in mind. As a foreigner, things are a little bit more tricky. Keep in mind, people are not racist. They don't think that, but they have really not a leg to stand on if you go out, max out a credit card, and leave the country. Point in case, if you look in the Middle East, specifically, if you look at like Dubai, they had a big issue here about 5-10 years ago that they were giving credit cards to foreigners, and anyone could get it, just even like a tourist visa, go in and pick it up. They thought it was a great idea. Obviously, that failed miserably because people would buy a bunch of stuff and then fly out of the country. Obviously, that program or programs from numerous banks is no longer there. Personally, I think the banks did that because all of their losses they can use as a giant tax write-off, but we won't get into that. But yeah, so keep in mind, you are much higher risk. So they are going to put you at a higher standard. So basically, the best way to look at this is if you and a Korean are side by side and you're both applying, they're going to review you like you are applying for the super deluxe platinum black level card, and they're just applying for the normal, even though you're both applying for the normal card. For example, I'm gonna name two off the bat that you just do not want to mess with. Hyundai card. I think it's very funny because their commercials are in English and they have a lot of white guys and black guys and everything in the commercials that, oh, we're so international, Hyundai card. And basically, here's the thing. If Bill Gates lived in Korea, he would be denied this credit card, specifically because their rules, specifically, again, Hyundai card, only Hyundai card. You have to be an executive level of a publicly traded company position in Korea, not at a foreign firm. So, for example, if you are the CEO of Google Korea, you would probably get this card. But that's pretty much it. Now, you could work for Google Korea, but if you're just a mid-tier manager, you don't qualify. Even if they pay you 10 million won a month, you don't qualify. Samsung card, pretty much the same thing. I was really close to getting this one myself. Um, I work for a big company. One of the tables here, actually, well, you guys see the badge. I work for LG. Um, and my salary's pretty good. And I thought I really wouldn't have much of an issue. So I recently, when I bought my car, which is a Renault Samsung SM6, they offered me a card from Samsung. Which, if you guys don't know anything, it's actually Samsung cars are actually Nissan and Renault partnership, and then the Samsung name is just a name. They don't actually have any design or input or anything like that. And the Samsung ownership or partnership in that company is a 20% stake from Samsung Card. So obviously they're going to have these really good situations where you buy a car and they're going to get you a credit card from Samsung. It's usually a pretty good limit and good points and that kind of stuff. You know, free oil changes and all that for tires, discount. Well, okay, that sounds useful. And we went all the way through the process. And as a foreigner in Korea, I have the option not to enroll in national health insurance, and it's just the way that I'm set up in as a contract employee with LG, and so I don't have that insurance. So for whatever reason, Samsung gave me the pass. At the very end, they said, "Oh well, you don't have insurance." And I said, no. I said, legally, under Korean law, I do not have to. I've got international coverage. I don't need it. And they're like, well, we don't know about that. I said, well, I understand that. And they're like, well, we just don't have many foreigners. I'm like, I get that. So I sent them the document in Korean that shows them that it's legal. But they just got nervous and I just don't have a good feeling. I'm sorry, denied. Even though I met all the financial requirements, whatever, I bought a car from them. That was 37 million won when you throw in the tax and stuff, and they wouldn't even give me $1,000 credit card. I mean, they'll let me borrow money to buy a $37,000 car, but they won't let me borrow money to get $1,000 credit card. Again, Samsung card is very different than Samsung motors or electronics or whatever. And that's something you need to remember with a lot of these banks. A lot of these banks actually have different companies for their credit cards and debit cards than they do for their actual banking. So yeah, Hyundai and Samsung card, unless you're in a very good position, I just don't even waste your time. It's not even worth it. I know like eMart and stuff has great deals. Just don't waste your time. Citibank, Shinhan Bank, Standard Chartered Bank. Citi and Standard Chartered both have English. Shinhan has limited English. With all of these guys, they're typically going to have about a 50 million won per year salary minimum. And you're going to have some tax history to back that up for at least a year or two. And that's actually personally what I use is I use a Citi card. I really like Citibank. They have their point system is great. You can buy anything you want in Korea, and you just get universal points for everything, and then you can use those points to pay off the credit card bill. It's pretty simple. It's not, oh, you can only use it on tickets on Tuesdays and Thursdays and blah 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 blah. Nah, none of that. Just you get points, you minus it from your bill. It's simple, it's great. It works out really good. 20% on pizzas and 10% on groceries and etc. So anyway, so for a lot of the people out there that aren't making the 50 million or more, they're going to say, oh, what about me? Okay, well, you're not ruled out. Okay, it is possible, but you're going to have to play ball. And here's how you're going to do it. You've got basically Hana Bank, which is used to be KEB, and they used to be very foreign friendly. Anymore, I think they're really not. Basically, what you need to do with those guys is you need to maintain 1 million won cash balance in your account for a minimum of 6 months. After that point, you can apply for a card, and they will give it to you, but they may require some form of a deposit. For example, you have a $500 credit limit, but you're going to have give them a $500 deposit. Now, again, sometimes you need a deposit, sometimes you don't. That completely depends on a case-by-case basis and the banker and everything. Woody Bank. Woody Bank also will accept um, people that don't have any credit history, and you can. The cool thing with Woody is you don't have to wait 6 months. You can go in there and say, "Hey, I got 2 million in cash. Here it is. Give me a 2 million credit line," and they will. Now, as far as I can tell, it's pretty much like a debit card because it's not really credit because you've already given them the money and they're holding it as a deposit. Supposedly, you do make a small amount of interest on that money, but it's negligible. But the thing is, with that, you do get the points. You do get some of the, you can do the installment payments on online and in stores and that sort of thing. But the other great thing about it is that it does build your credit history. Car payments and credit cards and mobile phones are the three biggest things that build credit history. So if you're out there just trying to live off the grid with a prepaid and a debit card, you are doing nothing to help yourself long term. So if you're just in Korea for a couple of years or less, I wouldn't even mess with this stuff. But if you're like me and quite a few other guys that are here for life, then yeah, this is something you're definitely going to want to do. So the last thing is store credit cards. Again, I've had bad luck with these guys for similar situations. My position's kind of unique. Like I said, I'm under contract with LG, so I've got a LG email and LG desk and LG phone and LG whatever. But most people don't know this. A lot of like the chaebol style companies like Hanwha, Samsung, LG, even the banks and stuff, they have most of their people are under contracts. So, and I'm not just saying like low level people, I'm saying like they're high level people too. They're usually under 1 year contracts or 2 year contracts. So, and if you're under a contract, that again is a little bit more dicey. So they think, well, if they don't renew your contract, you don't have any money, and you owe all of this cash to us, it's kind of a risk for us. So they usually increase their rules on what they're going to look for. So again, with like Latte, it was the same thing. They said, hey, you need to get health insurance, and if you have health insurance from Korea, then you can get this card. Well, guess what? I don't really need a Latte Baekwajam credit card. I've got my city card. I'm good. I'm actually thinking about getting a standard chartered one as well. But the problem with standard chartered is, again, they might be a little picky on that insurance thing. And the other thing is standard chartered, although it's a big global bank, when you're doing the points and the free, like if you got, for example, G Market or Shipilban, and they do like the free installments, depending on the size of the bank, you'll get it. So like, for example, for Citibank, if I go and buy a new TV, I can get like a year of free financing. With Standard Chartered, because they're not that big of a bank and they're not that big of a card supplier, you might get 3 months. So, and or some stores face to face may not offer anything at all. As where with Citi, you usually get about 3 months for free minimum. If you're into breaking stuff up into payment. Okay, now bumping over to Japan just a little bit to clarify. It's like I said, it changed the names of the banks, guys. It's pretty much the same thing. Mizuno Bank is probably one of the most difficult to deal with. The best one I've had dealings with in Japan is Rizona Ginko or Rizona Bank. They're definitely not the most popular. The last time I checked, they do not have an English app. Their English website is extremely limited, but it is something out there. Debit cards are relatively new. Debit cards really started coming out in Japan as about 2012. A lot of people still don't know what it is. Cash is still king over there, but yeah, it's something to consider. So Japan and Korea. The biggest thing that you really need to consider is your employer. If you work for a big company, it's more solid. They think your pay is more solid. That's easier. So if you work for a university or something, you're pretty well set. If you're working for a small English teaching hagwon or something like that, yeah, you're going to have to go a much slower route. Like I said, a deposit or that sort of thing. Rizona Ginkgo, they did do some deposit cards in the past in Japan, but I'm not sure so much anymore. But yeah, basically, guys, is it possible to get a credit card? It is. But a lot of these people, they're really nervous when a foreigner comes in. They don't want to give you incorrect information, and they will do whatever they can to get you out of there as quickly as possible. Because they don't want to deal with it. And I'll even say it, with Citibank, I had to argue with them. I had to fight with them. A normal review process takes 3 days. You fill out the application, they call you, and they let you know. It took me 45 days. 45 days. I can't even tell you how many phone calls I had back and forth, faxing. Oh, we need proof of employment. Okay, 2 weeks later, well, we got your proof of employment, but that was 2 weeks ago. We just want to make sure you're still working there. Okay, update it, stamp it, send it again. And then they will, until the very last minute, they will contact your HR department. Like right before they press the button to print you a card, they will call again to make sure you're still employed. So make sure that your HR guy or whoever is in control of your job as a contact is answering the phone and is well aware. Do not tell your company what you're doing. Just say, hey, I applied for a credit card. They're really strict on foreigners. Please be aware of that. Have this information available and make sure they've got your salaries right. If they sit there and they think you're making X amount of dollars, but you're really making this much money, and they're telling them it's lower than what you said, then yeah, that's kind of going to set off some red flags. So anyway, you guys will be pretty well set with this. So like I said, if you got any personal questions or whatever you want about this subject, put them in the comments below. I'm more than happy to help out. Like I said, I don't work for a bank or anything, but I do have some pretty good friends that do work for big banks in Korea. And so I can definitely bounce some questions off of them if I need to. So anyway, good luck. And yeah, that's it.